Attention bands and musicians. Are you looking to promote and market your music? Check out Unleashed Music. Visit unleashedmusic.com and tell them Rob from Talking About Rock sent you. On this episode of Talking About Rock, Marc Ferrari from Cold Sweat. Talking About Rock, sponsored by School of Rock, North Buffalo, where they're making musicians every day. Welcome to this episode of Talking About Rock. I'm Rob Edwards. Today's guest has rock stages with Ron Keel, opening for Aerosmith and Bon Jovi. He's crossed America with Crocus, Quiet Riot, and Queensryche, as well as playing with his band Cold Sweat on dates with Ronnie James Dio. Joining us now, we have Marc Ferrari from Cold Sweat. Marc, how are you, man?
All good in the hood, Rob. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on Talking About Rock, man. Definitely. So tell us about putting this latest album together, Unburied, Alive here.
Yeah, well, it's a very appropriately titled album. The Unburied part is due to the 4 tracks that were recorded back in 1991 as demos, and they've been buried for all these years. I don't even think they got out onto YouTube. A lot of the early Cold Sweat demos that I did under the name Ferrari are out there, but these have been buried pretty good for a better part of 30 years. And then the Alive part is due to two different live shows that are included on the album. The first one being from the 2020 Monsters of Rock cruise, which was our first gigs back after 30 years. And then there's also a very rough recording of us from the 1990 Monsters of Rock Festival in Mannheim, Germany. We were over there supporting Whitesnake was the headliner that year. Whitesnake, Aerosmith, Dio, Poison, Vixen, and us. So it was a pretty good lineup. So the combination of the Unburied part and the Alive part makes for the Unburied Alive title. So,
Got it. What a great package, man. A little bit of everything, man. And you've definitely played with some heavy hitters for sure here. And I was reading, you're originally from the Western New York area.
That's right. I'm from a tiny little. Why? Where are you? Are you there too? Or
I'm in the Western New York area. Yeah. So I was reading a little bit about your history, and I'm like, hey, look at that. All right. Yeah. Reading about, you're originally from the area and stuff. And I think it said you headed out to LA in '84, and you never looked back after that.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, I'm from this tiny little town called Batavia, which is halfway between Buffalo and Rochester, and actually in that county, I think there's more cows than there are people up there. And I graduated in 1980, actually, and I got the hell out of there as fast as I could. I actually went to Boston first. I moved to Boston. I was there for 3 years, and then moved out to Los Angeles in January of '84. So we are on the 40-year anniversary of me moving to LA, getting involved with Keel. First Keel show was anniversary was April 7th of '84. I posted on that. And so we're rolling up to the 40-year anniversary of us recording the Lay Down the Law album. So this is an important year for Keel. It's a big number, 40 years,
Oh, yeah, definitely. And you guys had some great tours going, like I was saying, opening for Aerosmith, Bon Jovi, just a great run and stuff with Keel going on. Excellent
Motley
stuff.
Crue, we did dates with Motley Crue. She mentioned we did tours with Crocus, with Queensryche, with Accept. We were out there quite a bit. We had a number of good long tours that gave us a lot of visibility. And unfortunately, Keel didn't. We never achieved the multi-platinum status that a lot of our compadres did. But we were out there. We gave it a good shot. That's all I can say on that.
Yeah, and you did a lot of other interesting things as well. You were also in Wayne's World movie 1 and 2.
Yeah, well, that was a fun thing to do, be involved with. I can tell you that, and that was due to my relationship with Penelope Spheres, who directed Wayne's World 1, and Keel got to do a video with her back in 1987. We covered a song called Rock and Roll Outlaw on the soundtrack for one of her movies. The movie was called Dudes, by the way, Dudes. And Jonathan Cryer is the star of that, who went on to be in 2.5 Men, of course. But we had the lead off single on that soundtrack, and we got to do a video with Penelope, and I stayed in touch with her. And originally I called her up to see if I could maybe contribute some music to the film. And she said, "No, I got that covered, but I need a guitar player for the film. And, what are you doing this summer?" I said, "I'm doing your film. That's what I'm doing. What else would I be doing?" Right.
Right.
Yeah. And so that filmed in the summer of 91. And that movie came out on Valentine's Day in 92. And then Wayne's World 2 filmed in the summer of 93, 2 years later.
Yeah. And I was reading, and a lot of people don't know this, I think. So I was reading Peter Frampton was initially booked to be in Wayne's World 2, but it didn't kind of pan out or work out, or it just wasn't all there.
Yeah, he was there. He was hung out with him for the better part of a couple of days. I heard David Lee Roth originally was supposed to be in there too, and they probably didn't work things out with him. Crazy guy that he is.
Right.
But yeah, Peter Frampton was one of my guitar idols. A lot of people don't see past the pretty boy image of Peter Frampton, but he's an amazing guitar player, really melodic guitar player, and it was certainly one of my influences growing up. Frampton Comes Alive was huge.
Yeah, groundbreaking album for the time, and now he's finally getting the recognition he so rightly deserves. Right, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee coming up, so that's very cool for him as well. Yeah.
So Wayne's World 2, a lot of fun hanging out, not only with Frampton and Aerosmith, but Chris Farley. He's one of the roadies. He was there, and just being around all those guys was such an amazing experience.
Yeah, that would be hilarious hanging out with them. I could just imagine some of the antics going on behind the scenes when they weren't filming and stuff.
I'm hoping they should complete the trilogy and do Wayne's World 3. I've always said that.
Right?
Come on, they're doing Spinal Tap 2 after 40 years.
Right, that's coming out. So yeah.
Maybe there's a hope for Wayne's World 3.
maybe, yeah. So you're not one to sit around and do nothing. So after Cold Sweat disbanded, you started something else, your Master Source music catalog as well.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The grunge movement kind of put me out of a job as far as being a touring musician there for a while. And, I needed to keep the lights on and the food on the table. And I started getting some of my demos that I had hanging around. I started getting those used in TV shows. Friends of mine were working on these films or TV shows as assistant coffee makers or whatever it was they were. But turns out, when you roll the clock all the way back to the early 90s, there were these music libraries out there at the time, but none of them had songs. None of them had stuff that sounded like it could be Van Halen, or sounded like it could be AC/DC, or sounded like it could be Garth Brooks or Madonna, or or whoever it was they were trying to license at the time. So my idea was, what? Forget about trying to license that Van Halen song. It's never going to happen. It's going to cost too much money, going to take too long. But I can create something for you that's, similar to that. It's not
in that style, right? Yeah.
In the style of, in the ballpark of, in the same genre of all these artists. And, I can have it to you in a couple of days or a week, and, you can take a decimal point or two off the license fee. Right. So that was my idea, and it took off like a freaking rocket. And very quickly I became the go-to guy to a lot of the major film studios and television production companies for this kind of music, because they couldn't afford these big acts.
Right.
It took way too long to license, especially on the TV side where these shows were filming every week. They had to have this stuff quickly,
Right. And they don't have those type of budgets on TV shows to be doing that.
Yeah. So that was my little idea. This wasn't my game plan. It just kind of, I fell into it, and I ran with it, and did very well with it. I sold my business to Universal in 2007, and I stayed on 5 years to run it for them. I became a division president in the Universal Music Group for 5 years. And during this time, I was still playing a little bit because Keel got back together in 2009. So I had my day job for a while. But and I'm still involved in that space, even though I'm not employed by Universal anymore. I still produce music for them, and I'll do a couple of projects for ESPN and some other clients. I do music supervision for a film company. I got my fingers in a lot of different pies.
Yeah, I don't think anybody realized how huge that music marketing was going to be at licensing, different things like that, how it's exploded into all different things. And nowadays, obviously, on all the social media as well. You know what I mean? Just all over the place.
Yeah, well, I was lucky to be very, very early on in that game. I was one of the first guys out of the starting block doing this, and it was really, again, it wasn't my game plan. It was just something that one door closed and another door opened, and it allowed me to stay close to music. I didn't have to, put on spandex or, have to deal with whatever genres were hot at the time, I created all types of music, from rock to blues to jazz to Latin to rap, just about any world music, you name it, I did.
Right. And now you've reopened the door on Cold Sweat here, and you got some tracks you're going to be doing for that. So tell us a little bit about the new track you guys got. Well, I don't know if it's new, but re-released here, Rain Down, that you got out.
Well, yeah, that was one of the 4 songs that we had demoed back in late 90, early 91. And we got dropped after we came off the road in late 1990. Our A&R guy was fired. And along with that firing, all his signings were dropped, right?
Right. That's what happens. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, you get orphaned. It's pretty rare that a band will get picked up, or stay on the label if their A&R guy gets fired. It's rare. It does happen. But in our case, we hadn't really, we hadn't sold as many records as we liked. And so we recorded these demos, to try to secure another major label deal. But again, that was early 1991, the same year that Nirvana came out, and the same year that the grunge guys kind of came in and,
shook everything up totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a different environment. And so we were unable to secure another major label deal. And, I left Cold Sweat in 91, I guess it was. The guys continued without me as Sweat and Bullets. And they did a couple of demos, I think, with their new guitar player, Billy DeVette. But 91 was certainly kind of a seismic shift in the popularity of a certain type of music. Oh. So look, the commercial hard rock guys had a long run at it. You could say it started in '83 with Quiet Riot. They were the first heavy metal band to have a #1 album.
Yep, #1, yeah.
Even before Van Halen. Van Halen didn't have a #1 album, I think, till 1984. The '84 album.
'84 album. Yep.
Or exactly. 5150. So, yeah, Quiet Riot, 1983. Kind of started the whole commercial hard rock era, if you will.
Yep.
So it was a good run, and I don't even know how long the grunge guys had their day in the sun. I don't know if that was 8 or 9 years, maybe even less. But for a while, grunge took over, and then it was maybe the rap rock guys, or the new metal guys,
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting how styles shift, and a couple of bands kind of survived the whole grunge thing, the bigger bands, the Def Leppards, the Aerosmiths, the Bon Jovis. I'm sure their numbers were a little soft during that era, but they still kind of came out still unscathed, relatively unscathed.
Yeah, and now we're getting a second life with all this music again. Everybody wants to hear it again, and bands are touring constantly all over the place. New tours are getting announced every day. I see new dates, new festivals, new things going on, and it gives a lot of people a chance that didn't see some of these acts back in the day to get to see them now, or for myself, get to see them all over again.
Yeah. Well, there's also the cruises too, the Monsters of Rock cruise, and there's, I think, a couple other ones that feature, the commercial hard rock guys, and those cruises have been very, very successful. They always sell out. And matter of fact, Cold Sweat will be on the 2025 Monsters of Rock cruise. It'll be our second time on the cruise.
Cool. Yeah, I was just talking to Mike Fitz from Bad Marriage the other day, and they're waiting to see if they get re-signed on Monsters of Rock again. I got to go see that next year. That just looks amazing.
Yeah, I think Bad Marriage is on the Monsters on the Mountain festival, which is in August. And Cold Sweat did that in 2020. I think it was 22 or 23. We were there. So it was put on by the same promoters. So, but you're right. It's great to know that there's still a market out there for this kind of music, and that people are rediscovering it. In some cases, a new generation, the kids of the folks that were into this kind of music back in the 90s are turning their kids on.
Yeah. I see a lot of people, the couples, they bring their young kids to the shows and stuff. You see that all the time on the internet, on social media. These young kids getting into that, and it's definitely great. And I really like the tracks on the new album here, so I'm going to take a quick break, and we're going to play the track for Rain Down. We'll be right back here with Marc Ferrari on Talking About Rock. Okay, we're back here on Talking About Rock with Marc Ferrari, Cold Sweat. Just checked out the track from the new album, Unburied Alive, man. Great song, man. And not only are you a songwriter, man, but you're also a children's book writer as well. All these irons you got in the fire, man.
Yeah, well, I'm actually a two-time published author. My first book came out way back in 2002. It was called Rockstar 101. And that was the first book written by a recording artist that covered all the various aspects of the business side of things in music, putting a band together and choosing your team and, what to look out for and record contracts and that kind of thing. So that came out in 2002, as I mentioned, and probably needs to be updated because a lot of stuff has happened, especially in the digital world since 2002. But the children's book came a few years later. I became a dad, and
that changed your whole world for sure.
Well, when I moved to LA, I went from 0 to 60 really quickly. And when you get married and have a kid, you go from 60 to 0 pretty quickly. So. Right. But anyways, my daughter at a very early age, she was very time challenged. And we were always running late for things. We could not get her out the door on time for anything. And we tried all the tricks, put the clock ahead a few minutes or say, hey, we have to leave at 1:30 when we really had to leave at 1:45 or whatever it was.
Right.
But we constantly ran late for things. And one day, I don't know where this came from. I just blurted out, don't dilly-dally, silly Sally. I don't know where it came from. It's just like something that I just blurted out. And I said, myself, there's something there,
Right. Yeah. Kind of catchy.
Still working at the time for Universal. So when I retired from Universal, I circled back to that and I wrote, the manuscript for the book, and based on my daughter, a time challenged kid who just needs a little gentle nudging on how to manage her time a little better. And but it turns out, by the way, that so many adults have told me they bought the book because their spouse runs late or their adult child runs late or their best friend runs late or whatever. So it's not just kids that can be time challenged. But yeah, and submitting a document, a manuscript to a publisher is similar to submitting a demo recording to a record label. You do the manuscript, you send it out, you get a lot of no's, but in my case, I got a yes. It only takes one yes. And I did a fair amount of publicity for that book. As a matter of fact, if folks go to marcferrari.com, they can see some of the TV interviews I did for that book, support of that book. I was on ABC here and Fox and a couple of other news outlets here. But it was initially, intended to be kind of a love story for and about my daughter, but it's had a broader appeal.
Definitely. Very, very cool. And didn't you get some other TV time also in some TV shows then as well? Didn't you do some guest spots on some shows?
Yeah, well, after Wayne's World came out, all of a sudden I started getting calls. I was a member of the musicians union. We were all union members to be able to work on the film. And I started getting calls from the union. Hey, we saw you on Wayne's World, and this TV show needs a guitar player for an afternoon or 2 days.
Right.
Two or three of those gigs.
When they thought of a musician, they say, "Hey, call this guy. He's already been doing it."
Yeah, I was on an episode of Murder, She Wrote, the Angela Lansbury series. I think the episode title was "Death Goes Double Platinum," and then there was another series called Step by Step that I was also on. And I think there was a third one because there was a bunch of them there for a while, and it's not very glorious just sitting around there all day, waiting for them to yell action, and we didn't have speaking roles. We were just band members, but it was fun to have that experience. And
another notch in your belt, man. Another thing on that you can say that you did. So very cool. Yeah. So what's next for you in Cold Sweat? You got other plans beside that, or what's going on?
Well, I don't know when this is airing, but this coming weekend we will be appearing at the M3 Festival in Maryland. We're playing on Cinco de Mayo on this coming Sunday. It'll be my third time playing M3, but the first for Cold Sweat. And it's a really solid bill this year. Bret Michaels is the headliner with Dee Snider as his guest, Night Ranger, Striper, YNT, Pretty Boy Floyd, who are our label mates on MCA back in the day. So that's coming up this weekend. And, we're being submitted for some other things this summer. So we hope there's a few more gigs for us this summer. And as mentioned, we will also be on the Monsters of Rock 2025 cruise.
Very, very cool. So much stuff you got going on. Amazing. Well, I want to thank you so much, Mark, for spending some time with us, catching up with all the different stuff you got going on.
Yeah.
Just great to talk to you, man.
All right. Fair enough. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Definitely. If you folks out there have comments or questions for us, you can email us at talkingaboutrock@gmail.com. Like us and follow us on our social media. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out our website, Talking About Rock. Thanks again, man.
Party on.
All right, here we are with a little after show from Marc Ferrari here. Something we forgot to mention during the original interview. Mark had his hand in the can here back in the day, working with Pantera, doing some tracks with them. Tell us about that.
Well, that all started way back in 1985, believe it or not. This was Keel's first swing through Texas. I think we were opening for Accept at the time, and we were playing in Dallas, and there's a knock on the tour bus, and there's two scraggly kids out there wanting to know if they can come on and play me a cassette tape of their one of their albums. And turns out those two scraggly kids were the Abbott brothers, and that was the start of my friendship with the Pantera guys. And back then, by the way, Daryl hadn't even turned 19; he was still 18 years old. And they'd already recorded two albums, their first album and then Projects in the Jungle. And this was prior to Phil joining the band. And if anybody's heard those early recordings, it was a different band. It was commercial hard rock. But I loved it, man. And I started waving their flag immediately. And I helped them out the best that I could. Matter of fact, they actually got a production deal with the a company that Keel was signed to called Gold Mountain. But Gold Mountain never got them distribution, and so they were released out of that contract. But I actually helped them get their first recording contract. So fast forward a couple years when Phil gets into the band, and they're getting progressively heavier and heavier.
Right.
I used to fly down there on weekends just to hang out because they were so fun to hang out with, And I played them a demo that Keel had recorded of a song that I wrote called "Proud to Be Loud," which initially was intended to be on the fourth Keel album, which was the self-titled album. And for whatever reason, it didn't make the album. And I don't even remember why it didn't make the album, but played it for the guys. They loved it. And so wound up flying back down to produce that. Well, I use the word produce lightly. It really was Vinny, who was kind of in the driver's seat, and his dad owned the studio. His dad just passed earlier this year. But the dad owned the studio, and that's where they recorded all their albums back then. But I flew down and helped guide Phil just with the vocal melodies and stuff, and I played rhythm guitar on that song. And I also guested on that album. There's a song called "We'll Meet Again," which I played a solo on too. So that would have been 1988, I think that happened. So again, a couple years before they were signed to Atco. A couple years, I think Cowboys from Hell came out in 1990. So, yeah.
And that started their following. It's just been grown like crazy. And there's been a little controversy lately over with, having different folks, in Pantera, what they call it now, playing with them and things like that. But I still think the music's great and the fans love it, and they're just doing awesome.
Yeah. Well, look, they're honoring the legacy of the Abbott brothers, and, who am I to say it's not right for them to do that, and I'm still very friendly with Rex, and I know he's having a great time out there, and it's opening the doors for another generation of fans. You know, that album came out 34 years ago. We stop and think about that. That's mind blowing.
That's crazy. Yeah.
30, it's more than a third of a century ago. So, you know, yeah, and I'm sure there's all sorts of new fans, new generation of fans that are finding out about Pantera after seeing them and going back and buying the albums and all that. So it's only helping.
Yeah, but very, very cool. You've toured with so many heavy hitters here, man. And the one that stood out to me was obviously, that's no longer with us, Ronnie James Dio. That had to be an amazing experience being on the Dio tour, I would think.
Well, I was on twice. Keel supported Dio 1986 in Europe, and then Cold Sweat, I think that was the Sacred Heart tour, and then Cold Sweat went out with Dio here in the States on the Lock Up the Wolves tour in 1990. So I was blessed to have you know, a pretty close relationship with Ronnie. I'm still in touch with Wendy, you know, his ex-wife and manager, who managed Cold Sweat, by the way. So that's how we got the tour. And Ronnie produced a lot of the demos for Cold Sweat that helped us get signed. So he's a very important part of my you know, my story. He was a wonderful guy. As great of a singer and performer and writer as he was a greater human. And,
he always seemed to have time for his fans. He took the time to talk to people, you know, sign the autographs that you guys get barraged with at times from tons of people coming up to you. You know, you always seem to take the time to do that, but it seemed like he was a little bit of a perfectionist. He wanted stuff just so when he did his shows, and it shows through, you know?
Yeah. Well, he definitely could be, he could be demanding, but, you know, in a good way. He wanted the best out of everybody. He was giving his best, and he expected everybody around him to give their best too. And that's what's that saying? High tide raises all ships, right? So that was Ronnie. You know, he brought out the best in everybody.
Very cool. All right, man. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. We appreciate it.